No matter how amazing it may sound, life constantly gives us signs and hints that we just need to pay attention to and analyze the situation. At some point, my life began to go downhill, and I thought that I was doomed. But these difficulties helped me understand one thing. My wife is cheating on me, and I decided to act for sure. It was a typical Wednesday. I rise and prepare for work while my wife Beth, whom I've been married to for 5 years, gets to enjoy a bit more sleep before she must rouse herself and the children. I am employed at a respectable-sized accounting firm, comprising approximately 100 employees situated in Guelph, Ontario. Meanwhile, my wife holds the position of manager at a retail store. I maintain the conventional 9-to-5 schedule, whereas she works afternoon shifts, managing a women's clothing retail outlet until closing time. Although it's challenging as we only have 2 evenings together with our children, this arrangement seems to be functioning adequately for us. On weekdays, she drops them off at daycare and I collect them on my way home from work. To retain our daycare slots, we must pay for all 5 days, leading to a routine where she keeps the kids on one of her days off during the week and manages family errands on the other day while the kids are at daycare. In a few more years, she should qualify for a promotion to area manager, which will involve travel but also offer greater flexibility in her work hours. This means we'll likely be able to have dinner together most nights. Beth recently returned from maternity leave, so we're just starting to settle into our routine with our 1-year-old son George and our 3-year-old daughter Belinda. Today was one of her days off. We're still renting an apartment, but once things stabilize, we'll start looking for a house. Overall, things are going well. It's not perfect, but we have to adapt to the schedules our careers dictate. We knew this would be the case when we decided to start a family. As I drove into the parking lot, I heard someone call out my name. "Francis, good morning." Turning, I saw my friend Jerry, whom I've known since the first week of university, when we both tried to woo the same girl at a Frosh Week party. "Morning, Jerry," I greeted him. "Did you catch wind of any big meeting today?" "Nope. Had to bail early yesterday," he replied. "But I am sure we'll get the lowdown this morning. You know how the boss loves those morning announcements to rouse everyone." With a grin, he gave me a pat on the shoulder as we strolled inside. I arrived at my desk and kicked off the day's work. Suddenly, an unexpected invitation disrupted our routine, leading to an urgent gathering in various meeting rooms. En route to my designated meeting, I ran into Jerry. Although he was supposed to attend a different session, he opted to accompany me. Suspicion arose when attendance was being recorded at each room's entrance, and Jerry was redirected to his original location. Inside our meeting room, 12 of us awaited the arrival of the company president and the human resources office manager. An atmosphere of tension filled the air as we exchanged nervous glances. The president began somberly. "Regrettably, I bring unfortunate news. We've lost the contract with the Henderson Group. As members of that team, you are all affected. For some, today marks your final day with us. Others will stay on during the transition period. I apologize for the situation." After that, my mind went blank. Lisa, the HR manager, then proceeded to distribute our packages. I was lucid enough to realize that today marked my final day. We were instructed to return home and review the contents of the packages. Later, we would be scheduled to return to the office to collect our desk belongings. Lisa tapped me on the shoulder. "Francis, I'm sorry, but it's time to leave." I simply nodded and rose from my seat. I still felt numb from the announcement as we were escorted out of the building. Someone had gathered our jackets and bags from our desks and handed them to us as we exited. As I settled into my car, reality suddenly washed over me. Tears welled up as I thought about Beth returning from maternity leave. How would we manage? After around 10 minutes, I composed myself. The last thing I needed was to get into a car accident amidst everything else. Glancing around, I saw others still sitting in their cars. Sally, my team leader, caught my eye. Her tear-streaked makeup spoke volumes. I offered her a sympathetic nod before driving home. As I entered the house, Beth appeared from around the corner asking, "Francis, why are you home?" I was all I could muster before collapsing onto the couch. She joined me, and I began, You know I was working on the Henderson account? She nodded. Well, the firm lost it and I've been let go. Tears welled up again. Is it temporary? She inquired. No, it's permanent. They sent me home with paperwork to go through. I anticipated a comforting hug and reassurance, phrases like, "What are we going to do?" Instead, she leaned back in her chair wearing a mix of anger and disappointment, the expression she usually dons when plans go awry. I ended up embracing her, murmuring, "Don't worry, we'll manage." I rose from my seat, gathered the bundle of documents, and proceeded to my home office for a thorough review. While engrossed in the papers, I caught snippets of Beth's conversation on the phone. Though the dialogue was somewhat muffled, I managed to pick up fragments like, "We have to cancel, I don't know when, and I know, me too." "Hey, who were you talking to, honey?" I called out. After a moment of silence, Beth responded, "It was the neighbor from next door. She mentioned bringing her kids over for a play date, but I informed her that we had to cancel." Odd, I mused, recalling no prior mention of plans with the neighbor. Besides, our kids were quite a bit younger than hers, so it wouldn't have been much of a play date anyway. Returning my focus to the papers, I aimed to decipher our current situation. With 6 years under my belt at the firm, they were granting us 2 weeks' pay for every year served, totaling roughly 3 months' worth of compensation. At least for the immediate future, we were financially stable. I quickly retrieved my resume, recognizing the urgency of the situation. Over the next hour, I diligently updated it, staying focused as usual. My plan was to have it ready before lunch, then dive into the job search in the afternoon. Beth popped in a couple of times, her expression still marked by anxiety. I reassured her about the 3-month pay package and our prospects. At lunch, Jerry called to check on me. "Doing the best I can given the circumstances," I replied. "How's Beth handling it?" he inquired. "She's not reacting as expected. Instead of being worried, she seems more inconvenienced, like I'm disrupting her plans," I explained. "It's probably just unfamiliar territory for both of you. She'll adjust," Jerry offered. "You're likely right," I conceded. "Maybe we should catch up once I've sorted everything out." "That sounds like a plan," he agreed. After lunch, I browsed through several job websites and managed to discover around 6 job opportunities worth applying for. The rest of the afternoon was dedicated to crafting tailored cover letters and refining my resume for each position before submitting the applications. Now, all that's left is to wait. Dinner passed relatively quietly until Belinda took it upon herself to lift our spirits and had us all in fits of laughter. We were keen on maintaining our daycare slots and sticking to the kids' usual routine, so they attended daycare on their regular days. However, Beth opted for a bit of playful mischief before heading off to work. I hadn't noticed it in her before. Due to our busy work schedule and the recent birth of our second child, our intimacy had been reduced to about once a week, and to be honest, it wasn't particularly exciting. We were usually too exhausted. However, on the very first day, when she was completely free from work, after taking the children to kindergarten, she surprised me by dressing provocatively and taking me to the bedroom. We were close for an hour until she had to go back to work. We used protection because we weren't sure if we should have a third child, and Beth always suffered from side effects when she took birth control pills, so she refrained from them until we were sure of our decision. When we were lying in bed, I asked, "What prompted us to do this?" "I thought you might need help," she replied, smiling and kissing me. I certainly wasn't going to complain. As soon as she left, I resumed my job search. That was my main occupation now. After a couple of weeks, the only positive aspect was the intimacy. I was the least experienced among the 6 others who had been laid off, and with the economy taking a downturn, despite attending a few interviews, none resulted in a job offer. Then, I received word from another company. They arranged an interview for the next day. I called Beth at her workplace to inform her. She confidently asserted that this opportunity would pan out. She just knew it. The interview was scheduled bright and early. Since the job was in Kitchener, I had a half-hour drive ahead of me. I felt confident about how the interview went and was optimistic about my chances. They mentioned they had a few more candidates to interview and would inform me of their decision the following week. I arrived home feeling excited, but upon arrival, I was perplexed. Beth greeted me at the door and inquired about how it went. It wasn't so much her words, but rather her overall demeanor. She wore that familiar, satisfied expression she usually has after we've been intimate, though we hadn't been today. I suppose my expression gave something away. "What's wrong?" she asked. "Oh, nothing." I quickly recovered and I was just reflecting on one of the questions they asked me. "Well, I'm sure you did well," she reassured, embracing me. That was another anomaly. I caught a whiff of her hair. Typically, she showers just before heading to work, which would be in an hour, but she had already showered. Something didn't add up. Beth didn't initiate intimacy with me in the following days. It felt as though she had satisfied some craving and didn't require another fix just yet. While awaiting the outcome of my recent interview, another company from Kitchener reached out to me and I arranged another morning interview. Beth was scheduled to work again today, so after my shower, I discreetly placed a hair on her shampoo bottle. Feeling inspired, I also placed a hair on my own shampoo bottle, ensuring it wouldn't get wet if Beth decided to shower. I took a photo of the setup for comparison later. Beth gave me a good luck kiss and then I set off. Despite my efforts to stay focused, I felt the interview went well. However, the interviewer didn't share the same sentiment. She candidly mentioned that my experience, mostly focused on one client over the past 6 years, lacked the breadth she sought. Yet she did express a liking for me and promised to keep me in mind for future opportunities. The journey back wasn't a cheerful one. Although not much time had passed since my layoff, I had hoped for more interviews and positive responses. The disappointment deepened when my previous employer called to reject me without explanation. I thanked them politely and ended the call, feeling like I was striking out with no hits so far. I arrived home to find Beth in the same state as she was after the previous interview, sporting that freshly ravished appearance. Again. Despite my frustration, relaying the disappointing news from today's interview didn't seem to faze her mood. Excusing myself to the bathroom, I decided to withhold the news of the previous interview until I confirmed my suspicions in the shower, seeking solace in the familiarity of a plan. "Damn," I muttered under my breath. Both her and my shampoos were displaced and damp. The photo I took wasn't even necessary. She wasn't the only one in need of tidying up. It was clear she had been unfaithful. Taking a deep breath, I sat on the toilet, contemplating what else could possibly go wrong in my life. After about 10 minutes, Beth knocked on the door. "Are you all right, honey?" she inquired. "Just a moment," I replied, opening the door. For the first time, she seemed genuinely concerned about me, though my distress stemmed from more than just the job search. She embraced me. "We'll get through this. It's only been a few weeks. Keep applying, and something will eventually work out." I mustered a small smile for her, receiving another hug and a kiss on the cheek in return. "Sorry, but I need to prepare for work," she said. Exiting the bathroom, she proceeded with her usual shower routine, perhaps to maintain appearances. After she left for work, I continued sending out job applications, expanding my search parameters while devising my simple plan. Later that evening, I enjoyed a wonderful dinner and spent quality time playing with the kids before putting them to bed. When Beth returned home, I delivered the fabricated good news. "Beth, remember that interview from a few days ago? They've asked me to come in for a second interview tomorrow morning." She embraced me, saying, "That's fantastic news. Hopefully everything will go smoothly tomorrow." "I'm sure it will," I responded, though not in the manner either of us hoped. The following morning I awoke and took a shower, preparing myself as if I were indeed heading for that second interview. Beth was already up, preparing breakfast for me and wishing me luck. Afterward, I returned to our bedroom to finish getting dressed. Finding myself alone, I discreetly pulled back a corner of the curtain, allowing a small glimpse outside. With a goodbye kiss from Beth, I left the house. Instead of proceeding to Kitchener as before, I drove back home after dropping the kids off at daycare. Parking discreetly around the corner, I walked back to the house. Spotting a familiar car in the driveway, I instantly recognized it as belonging to her ex-boyfriend, Bill. They had been high school sweethearts but parted ways when he began working at his father's auto shop while she pursued university studies in Toronto. Bill had since married, even having 3 children with his wife, a friend of my wife's who he impregnated during my wife's 3rd year of university. My wife had even been a bridesmaid in their wedding, but all of this occurred before I met Beth. I knew Bill quite well, as we would occasionally meet up a couple of times a year. He now manages his father's auto shop following his father's step back due to a heart attack. I quietly entered the rear of the apartment complex. Our unit was situated on the 2nd floor, and I could discern their sounds of pleasure emanating from the bedroom. Swiftly, I activated my phone's camera and began recording. Utilizing a nearby picnic table, I positioned myself to reach the window, ensuring a clear view through the lens. Conscious of the risk of being discovered by either her or an inquisitive neighbor, I aimed to capture only essential footage. My objective was to capture both of their faces, and luck was on my side as they changed positions, granting me the desired money shot to a clear view of their expressions. With the recording complete, I stealthily retreated to my car. Driving across town, I sought solace and contemplation at a diner. It was clear that the divorce lawyer was the priority. Luckily, with Beth working in the afternoon, I had ample time to make calls. But Bill couldn't escape consequences for tearing my family apart. As I sipped my coffee, I resolved to investigate Bill. Opening his Facebook page, I found sparse information, so I turned to his wife, who seemed to document every moment of her life. After scrolling through their posts and photos, the situation worsened. Their oldest daughter had just turned 9. Bill's wife had posted a series of photos showing her at different ages. At 3, Bill's daughter resembled mine eerily. How long had Beth been with him? Were the children even mine? I slammed my fist on the table, drawing stares in the diner. Muttering an apology, I settled the bill and left. Beth would be waiting at home. Arriving home, I composed myself. When she asked about the job, I lied, saying I didn't get it. It was the easiest way to conceal my true feelings at the time. I remained concealed in my office while she prepared for work. Just before departing, she poked her head in and assured, "Don't worry, things will work out next time." I mustered a smile, rose from my seat, and embraced her. Maintaining appearances was crucial. Once she departed, I dialed a friend, a divorce attorney I knew from university. He had been admitted to the bar just 2 years prior. His motivation stemmed from his mother's mistreatment by her divorce attorney during his parents' separation. Disgusted by his father's infidelity, he was determined to ensure others weren't similarly wronged by unfaithful spouses. He seemed like the perfect choice for me. "Jim, regrettably, I require your services." "Can you squeeze me in today?" I inquired upon reaching him on the phone. "Are you certain?" he inquired. "I am, and I have the evidence to substantiate it," I replied. "Understood. I'm sorry to hear that. I have an opening at 1:30, he confirmed. I arrived at his office at 1:30. We sat down and got straight to the point. "Francis, I apologize for having to bring you in under these circumstances. Are you certain?" I remained silent, pulling out my phone and playing the video. "All right, you're certain," he said. "Do you have any idea how long this has been going on?" I then shared with him what I had discovered on Facebook. "Do you know how I can verify if they are mine?" Unfortunately, I've dealt with a similar case before, where paternity needed to be confirmed. The test itself isn't complicated, but for legal purposes, the sample collection needs to be witnessed. I paused briefly, considering the situation. Realizing it was Friday, I proposed, "Would you be available to test them, let's say next Wednesday?" "Sure, that works. You'll still be picking them up from daycare while she's at work, right?" he inquired. "Yes," I confirmed. "Why don't you bring the kids over to my place for dinner? They can play with my son and we can arrange to take the samples while we're at it," he suggested. "That sounds like a plan. It'll ease my mind to have clarity," I admitted. "Francis, don't worry. I'll handle everything for you. DNA results usually take 5 to 7 business days, so we'll have to wait a few weeks for those. In Ontario, divorces can't be finalized until you've been living apart for at least a year, but there are exceptions for circumstances like adultery. I'll push for an exemption based on that. I suggest we hold off on finalizing the filing until we have the DNA results," he advised. I nodded in agreement. He went on, "Moreover, regarding finances, you've been incredibly supportive over the years. We'll handle that matter, and you don't need to reimburse me until we've resolved everything." "Thank you. I'm grateful for that," I replied. We shook hands and I departed. I proceeded on my journey, opting to visit a walk-in clinic. I wanted to confirm my STD status. Given the circumstances, I couldn't rely on anything. When you're in a tough situation but have a plan of action to stay occupied, it's manageable. But waiting can be a different story. Luckily, the kids kept me occupied over the weekend, and it seems like Beth's last dose of Bill kept her satisfied for now. The thought that the kids might not be mine brought me down a bit. That was the hardest part. But if they weren't mine, then Beth's betrayal would be unforgivable, and I'd need to move on. Now my concern was getting through Monday and Tuesday when Beth was off. I thought it would be a good idea to go on day trips to keep myself distracted and maybe explore things further with Beth. On Monday, we visited a nearby animal safari where the baboons try to snatch your car's side mirrors. Then, on Tuesday, we hit up a water park. The best part was we were all too tired for anything extra afterward. Wednesday came and Beth returned to work. It seemed that she was hungry for their portion because in the morning, after taking the children, she began to molest me, hinting at intimacy. I feigned depression and explained that I wasn't in the mood due to the lack of job prospects lately, though it was really bothering me. It wasn't as much as the suspicion of her infidelity. I mentioned to her that Jim had called, concerned about my job loss, and invited me for dinner. I felt it was important to be transparent with Beth, just in case Belinda had mentioned something to her. I decided to spend the day with the kids. Regardless of their paternity, I cared for them and would continue to be their father until told otherwise. I received a call from the clinic confirming I was clear of STDs. For now, I needed to maintain appearances. So as long as we used condoms, I saw no harm in enjoying the occasional intimacy. However, I made sure not to take any risks. Later, we headed to Jim's for dinner. The conversation revolved around job hunting and the children, avoiding any mention of Beth and me. After dinner, Jim's associates arrived. George was cooperative. He didn't reveal any secrets, and we managed to obtain his sample without Belinda noticing. With Belinda, we devised a little diversion. We indulged in ice cream. I challenged her, proposing that a cotton swab was superior to a spoon for consuming ice cream. She found my suggestion amusing, so we both used cotton swabs to scoop up some ice cream and then sucked it off. Afterwards, we handed our swabs to Uncle Jim, who passed them on to the associates. One of them would analyze the swabs in the morning. Belinda dismissed the game as nonsensical. She firmly believed that spoons were far superior. With samples collected, all that was left was to wait a week and a bit for the results. Over the next week, I continued to look for another job, but did not pass any interviews. I maintained a relationship with Beth, but we limited our activities to intimacy, avoiding anything else. Despite the fact that she was upset at times, I didn't do things that didn't suit me. On Friday morning, Jim called and asked me to come to the office. I arrived at lunchtime and found my friend Jerry already there, which seemed ominous to me. "Francis, the results of the DNA analysis have been received," Jim began solemnly. "They confirm that although they have the same father, it's not you." I couldn't contain my emotions and covered my face with my hands, tears streaming down my cheeks. Jerry sat down next to me, offering his support. "Francis, I'm truly sorry." After a brief interval, I straightened myself up and brushed away the last traces of tears from my eyes. I had anticipated this outcome for a while now, having mulled over various scenarios in the past few weeks. "Now what?" I inquired. Jim presumed, "I suppose you're considering filing, right?" I glanced at Jerry, who offered his silent approval. "Absolutely. However, I've had ample time to ponder. Can we initiate divorce proceedings without initially mentioning adultery or the children, and then amend the filing later to include those details?" "Certainly, but why?" Jim queried. "I want to catch her off guard. I aim to deliver a two-punch, first with the divorce and then with the revelation of adultery and paternity results," I explained. "We can arrange that. How would you like to proceed?" Jim inquired. "Here's my plan," I began. Jerry had kindly offered me his spare bedroom if I needed a place to stay, and I assured him that I would definitely take him up on the offer. Since we were renting and saving up for our own house, all our assets were in cash, totaling about $60K, excluding our retirement funds. With my new job, I'd be making roughly the same as Beth, so now that child support was no longer a concern, our financial split should be straightforward. However, I intended to be a bit cunning about it. Jerry had taken the afternoon off to assist me, probably thinking he'd just keep me company. But I had different plans in mind. We went to thrift stores to shop for second-hand clothing. Then we returned to my home. We began organizing my belongings, substituting some with second-hand clothes I purchased from thrift shops. I picked up a few cheap suit jackets to replace my usual suits. I kept aside a few garments for the weekend and one suit for Monday, aiming to maintain the appearance of the closets. Since she was occupied with work over the weekend, I hoped she wouldn't notice the switch, fearing an empty closet would give it away. I intended to pack more during the weekend, but the remaining items could easily fit in my car trunk, which I planned to do on Sunday before her return from work. Monday marked D-Day, divorce day, that is. I informed Beth that I had secured another interview for Monday morning. Anticipating she would be served at home around 10 a.m., I ensured I was parked nearby with my belongings in the trunk, ready to observe the process server's arrival at the apartment building. Afterwards, I went to Jerry's. Since Jerry and his wife were both at work, they entrusted me with a key to their house. As I made my way there, my phone incessantly rang and buzzed with calls and text messages, knowing I had set her ringtone to George Michael's Freedom. I chose to ignore the calls, opting to address the messages later while enjoying a drink. I parked my car in the garage and shut the door as a precaution in case she came searching for me. After finishing moving the boxes into their spare bedroom, Jim called unexpectedly. "Jim, this call caught me by surprise. What's going on?" I inquired, wearing a smile. I could hear him chuckle as he replied, "For some reason, Beth has been blowing up my phone." I chuckled. "What did you say to her?" "Well, after calming her down, I advised her to get a lawyer and have her lawyer reach out to me. You won't be communicating directly with her. Everything will go through me," he explained. "Perfect. Let's give it some time before we arrange a meeting. I want her to stew a little," I remarked. With that, I ended the call. The subsequent calls came from her parents. I appreciated them, but I wanted to have all the information before discussing their daughter and her actions with them. Jerry phoned about an hour later to check on me. He mentioned that Beth had reached out to him. He claimed ignorance about my whereabouts and feigned surprise when she brought up the divorce papers. "I should win an award for my performance," he remarked. On Wednesday, her attorney contacted Jim. They proposed a meeting for the upcoming Monday. Jim inquired about the duration of the meeting. After considering, I opted for a shorter time frame. Since Monday was her day off, I wanted to enjoy my weekend, so I requested the meeting be scheduled for this Friday. Let her take time off for this. Friday came around. The meeting was scheduled for after lunch at Jim's office. I arrived early and had lunch with Jim to avoid running into Beth on the way in. When they arrived, she looked terrible. Perfect. Jim began to speak, but Beth interrupted. "Why?" she demanded. I remained silent, merely fixing her with a stare. Jim interjected, "That will become clear soon. Let's proceed with our proposal." Then her lawyer spoke up. "This proposal is worthless. You're requesting alimony." Jim responded, "Only while Francis is unemployed, and then no alimony for either party once he finds a job." Her lawyer scowled. "And there's no mention of child support." Jim glanced at me and smirked. "Well, it's only fair that the father of the children contributes child support, isn't it?" The other attorney appeared puzzled and responded, "Well, yes." Beth's expression resembled someone anticipating a heavy blow. "In that case, she should pursue child support from the father," Jim declared, reclining as if stating the obvious to those who hadn't fully grasped the situation. "But he is the father," the other attorney clarified. Beth looked as though she might faint, repeatedly mouthing, "No." Jim then produced additional documents and a USB drive. "We're going to amend the divorce filing," he announced, passing the USB drive and a sheet of paper to the other attorney. "First, to expedite the divorce process citing adultery. There's a compelling video on that USB drive showing Beth with her ex-boyfriend. Make sure you have popcorn ready when you watch it." The attorney's expression turned to one of shock, eliciting tears from Beth. She began to utter apologies, but Jim interjected. Jim produced another set of documents. The second amendment pertains to the child support issue. These are the DNA test results indicating that Francis is not the father of Beth's children. We can speculate on the identity of the father, but we'll leave that for Bill's wife to discover. Beth seemed to grasp the implication as her tears ceased, and she inquired, "What do you mean, Bill's wife?" This revelation marked the climax. Jim elaborated. "Well, at this moment someone is delivering a letter of explanation, along with a video on another USB stick, and the DNA results to Bill's wife. Additionally, I've included my contact information, offering legal representation." Beth's true colors emerged as she defended Bill. "But that would ruin their marriage." Jim grinned. "Ruining their marriage is inevitable. When Bill's father's health declined, he transferred ownership to Bill. My understanding is that Bill's wife manages the office and essentially runs the business. My letter outlines my proposal for her to take over the auto shop. They don't have a prenuptial agreement." Beth burst into tears once more. Jim then glanced at Beth's attorney. "Would you mind reviewing the documents I've provided? We could schedule a meeting for early next week." He extended his hand, and the other lawyer, still processing everything, absent-mindedly shook Jim's hand as he ushered Beth out of the office. Beth attempted to say something to me, but I simply turned away and headed to Jim's office. It took another month, but we eventually reached an agreement. I dropped the entire alimony issue, but secured everything else I had proposed. Meanwhile, Bill's wife was aggressively pursuing him. She withdrew her demands for child support and alimony in exchange for complete ownership of the auto shop. She and Jim even obtained court approval for a third party to oversee the business finances during the divorce proceedings, ensuring neither party could embezzle funds. However, this meant Bill's income took a significant hit, and he still had to meet interim alimony and child support payments without access to the business finances. Bill inevitably moved in with Beth, but now she was solely responsible for rent and daycare expenses, depleting her share of the house savings rapidly. Although my divorce settlement was reached, it would be several more months before it was officially finalized, and I still needed to secure employment. My severance survived the divorce proceedings, but it was dwindling. Then came a phone call. The woman on the line had interviewed me in Kitchener. While they still didn't have a position for me there, she inquired if I'd consider relocating. They were establishing a new branch office in another province and wondered if I'd like to join the team. It was the fresh start I craved. Jerry and his wife were supportive, yet saddened by my departure. I spent the next 2 weeks training at the Kitchener office, before moving to Charlottetown. With all my belongings packed, I bid farewell to Jerry and drove past the old apartment one last time. I'd heard there was tension at the auto shop, prompting Bill to work elsewhere until the divorce settlement. If his wife left, he'd have to pay more interim alimony. As I paused in my car, reflecting on what might have been, I witnessed Bill rushing out of the apartment with Beth in pursuit, throwing a shoe at him. Seems like she's enjoying her own version of paradise.
That's the end of the story. Write your opinion in the comments about this story. It will be interesting for us to read it. Also, do not forget to like and subscribe to our channel so as not to miss new, equally interesting and exciting stories. Good luck!